The phone rang just as I was settling into my armchair, tea in hand, the afternoon sun casting long streaks of gold across the living room carpet. I expected it to be a robocall, or perhaps a neighbor checking in. I did not expect the voice that greeted me. "Is this Eleanor Simmons?" the woman asked. Her tone was sharp, official, governmental. "Yes, speaking. This is Agent Morrison from the Internal Revenue Service. I'm calling in regard to your most recent tax filings, or rather discrepancies that have come to our attention." I blinked. "My what?" "Your filings for the previous 2 years. We noticed that your name appears on returns filed by another individual claiming you as a dependent." I nearly dropped the teacup. "A dependent," I repeated slowly. "Yes, ma'am." "Are you aware of anyone, possibly a family member, who may have included you as a dependent on their tax return?" I felt the blood rush to my face, 1,000 thoughts racing, but only one name rising clearly in the storm: Amber. "My daughter-in-law." "No," I said, breath-catching. "I most certainly did not authorize anyone to do that." There was a pause. "In that case, Mrs. Simmons will need to formally open an investigation. If this is fraud, there are legal implications." I gripped the arm of the chair. "Please, tell me who filed it." "I'm sorry, ma'am. That information is confidential during the preliminary stages of the investigation. But I suggest you speak to your household." The line went dead. I sat frozen in my living room, the silence suddenly heavy. I had spent the last 5 years living on their property, tucked away in the guest house out back, told I was part of the family, loved included. But love doesn't show up as fraud on a government record. I was being erased, financially, legally, and now, officially. 1 week earlier, we had been sitting around the dinner table. Amber was carving roasted chicken, her smile warm and entirely fake. "It's so nice to all be together. Family dinners like this are what keep us close, right, Mom?" She called me Mum so sweetly in front of others, but in private she barely looked at me. Daniel, my son, was scrolling through his phone, not paying attention. Our granddaughter Lily had earbuds in. Only I had noticed the mail Amber tucked away quickly into the side drawer when I walked in, letters from banks and tax institutions. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now I was seeing it clearly. Amber had access to my documents, my social security number. She'd insisted on helping me organize my finances after I moved in. "You don't need to worry about these things anymore," she'd said, with a hand on my shoulder. "You've done enough your whole life. Let us take care of you now." I thought she meant love. She meant control. She didn't want to help me. She wanted to use me. I walked back to the guest house that evening and dug through the drawer where I kept my important documents. Empty. The folder containing my old W-2s, pension letters, and ID copies gone. I opened my password notebook. 2 pages had been torn out. I stood in that small, dim room, once a storage shed, now my retirement suite, and realized I was a ghost in my own life. No independence, no privacy, no rights. I wasn't being cared for. I was being harvested. The next day, I waited for Amber and Daniel to leave for errands, then quietly slipped into the main house. I knew the key was still under the porch planter. They always assumed I wouldn't snoop. In the home office, once the dining room now filled with podcast microphones and motivational posters, I began searching. Amber's files were organized and labeled. She was efficient in everything she did, including apparently theft. And there it was, a printed copy of their most recent tax return. Line 6C dependents. Name Eleanor Simmons. Relationship mother-in-law. Months lived in home 12. Dependent status yes. I covered my mouth. My hands were shaking. She had actually done it. Submitted this to the IRS. Lied on federal documents. Claimed me as property. That night, I confronted Daniel in the kitchen. "You let her file taxes with me as your dependent." He looked up, caught off guard, and then glanced toward the hallway. Mum, I didn't know. Amber said it was fine. She said, because you live here and don't pay rent, it's legal. I buy my own groceries. I pay for my phone. My pension goes into my bank account, which she has the password to, by the way. Daniel paled. Wait. She said you gave her permission. She also said she'd help me reset my online banking. Then, 2 weeks later, my savings account had a withdrawal I didn't authorize. He stepped back. You think she's stealing from you? I think she's turning me into an asset, I snapped. She's taken over my money, claimed me on her taxes, and now she's made me legally dependent on her. So when something happens, she can speak on my behalf. He looked horrified, but he said nothing, and that silence told me everything. The next morning, I called the IRS back. This is Eleanor Simmons. I'm ready to file a formal fraud report, and I want to know what else has been submitted under my name. The agent was quiet, then said gently, You're not the first senior citizen we've spoken to about this exact situation. I wasn't just betrayed. I was part of a pattern. Amber wasn't just manipulative, she was calculating. And suddenly, everything came together. The casual comments about taking care of me, the way she insisted on updating my records, the time she rushed me through signing a consent form for a tax document, which I now realized was probably power of attorney. This wasn't care. This was conquest. That evening, I typed a letter to my bank, to a lawyer I once met through a friend, to Lily's school revoking any authorization Amber had in my name, and to the IRS a full signed statement. I wasn't going to be erased quietly. She had turned me into a line item on a tax form, but I was about to turn her entire life into an audit. She claimed me as a dependent, but now I was declaring war. Please stay with this story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my voice carries. I remember the first time I met Amber. She walked into our home wearing a floral dress that didn't quite fit the season, clutching a small, nervous smile. Her eyes darted around the living room like she expected to be judged at every corner, and perhaps she did. Daniel, my son, was smitten. He brought her in like she was carrying the future in her arms. I remember the way his hand rested protectively on her lower back, and the way he introduced her as if she were already family. Mom, this is Amber, he said. Be nice. She's different. He had said those words like a warning, but I didn't need them. I liked her instantly. Not because she was perfect, far from it, but because I saw something in her that I recognized in myself when I was young, someone trying to prove she belonged. She told me about her difficult childhood, about growing up in and out of her aunt's care, about how no one in her life had really stuck around. Her voice cracked when she said it, and without thinking, I placed my hand over hers. You're safe here, I told her. We take care of our own, and I meant it. When Daniel proposed, she ran into my arms first, before even calling her best friend. She said she didn't know how to plan a wedding, that she never imagined herself having one. She didn't know the traditions or the etiquette, so I offered to help. I didn't just help, I carried her through it. I drove her to dress fittings. I negotiated with the florist after she burst into tears over the centerpiece costs. I paid for the caterer up front quietly, so Daniel wouldn't feel the pressure. I remember her crying in the dressing room after the final fitting. I thought it was about the lace needing alterations, but then she turned to me and said, I've never had a mum before. Not really. I hugged her so tightly that day, tighter than I ever hugged my own daughter who passed away before her 3rd birthday. Something in me clicked a healing, maybe. I had lost a daughter. And now I was gaining another, or so I thought. When they moved into the main house, it was my idea. I offered them the home my husband and I built from scratch, while I would move into the smaller suite out back. I said it was easier for me to maintain, that I didn't need much space anymore. But the truth was, I just wanted them to feel rooted. I wanted them to start a life without the financial burdens I had once faced. And when Amber hesitated, saying she didn't want to displace me, I smiled and said I'm not being pushed out. I'm stepping aside. There's a difference. She cried again that day. She always cried when I offered something big, like she wasn't used to people showing up for her. And that broke my heart. So I kept showing up. In their first year of marriage, I gave them space. I didn't call too often. I didn't drop in. I offered to babysit Lily any time, even when I wasn't feeling my best. When Amber launched her podcast, a niche channel about self-worth and boundaries, I was her first subscriber. I shared her links with my gardening group and told everyone she was a rising star. She never said thank you, but I didn't need her to. At least that's what I told myself. There were small signs that things were shifting. Amber started setting more boundaries, at first reasonable, then oddly rigid. She preferred to schedule visits instead of impromptu drop-ins. She asked me not to enter the main house when she wasn't there. She suggested I use a separate family calendar, one she controlled for holidays and school events. And Daniel, he went along with it all. I thought it was normal that she just needed control over her space. I rationalized every little shift, because when you love someone, you excuse a lot, maybe too much. I remember when she came to me asking if she could help with my finances. "You shouldn't have to worry about online banking," she said. "All those passwords, all those confusing screens. It's a headache." She offered to consolidate things just to simplify my life. She said it with a warm tone and soft hands. I trusted her. I gave her my login. I even let her reset some of my passwords because I was tired of writing them down and forgetting where I put the notebook. She even set up autopay on some of my accounts. "It's all streamlined now," she said. I thought she was doing me a favor. I cooked for them during holidays. I stayed up late making Lily's Halloween costume by hand. When Amber's mother fell ill and had to be moved into care, I was the one who picked up Lily from school and slept in the main house for a week. She told me I was a blessing. I believed her. I look back on it now. The dinners, the tears, the gratitude, the trust. And I realize I wasn't just giving her my time, my money, my space. I was giving her my heart, and she was taking it piece by piece, not to treasure, but to control. You don't notice when love becomes leverage. It doesn't come with a warning bell. It comes in little trades: your privacy for their convenience, your voice for their ease, your freedom for their comfort. And you trade because love is supposed to be sacrificial, until one day you realize you've sacrificed yourself. She once held my hand in the bridal boutique and whispered, "You make me feel like I'm not alone in this world." And I meant it when I said you never will be. But now I wonder if I was the only one who meant any of it. At first it was the small things, the kind of moments you don't recognize as turning points until you're staring back at them through the rearview mirror of betrayal. I remember knocking on the main house door one morning, a casserole dish in my hands. Chicken and wild rice, Amber's favorite, or at least it used to be. She opened the door, but didn't smile. "Oh," she said, her eyes flicking down at the dish. "You didn't text." I laughed, trying to make light of it. "I thought I'd surprise you." "Well, we're trying to reduce sodium this month," she said, taking the dish but not inviting me in. "But thank you." Then she closed the door gently but deliberately. That was the first time I realized I was no longer welcome unless I RSVP'd to my own family. Amber began to curate everything: what time I could visit, what topics were appropriate for dinner, how long I could stay in the main house. "I know you love telling stories from the past," she said once during a family brunch, "but sometimes it's a lot for Lily. She gets overwhelmed." Lily, who was 10 at the time, was sitting 2 chairs away watching TikTok under the table. Amber continued, I think it's best if we keep conversations light, nothing too emotional. Too emotional. Since when did reminiscing about her father's childhood become a threat to the emotional climate? I smiled through it. I nodded. I adjusted. And each adjustment chipped a little deeper into my dignity. Daniel changed too, subtly, slowly, almost imperceptibly. He stopped calling me Ma. He started texting instead of visiting. He once cancelled our Sunday gardening session, a tradition we'd kept for 15 years, because he said Amber had scheduled a podcast interview and needed quiet. She's building something, Mum. You wouldn't understand. It's exhausting trying to build a brand. Build a brand. What were we building when I worked 2 jobs so he could go to college? Apparently that didn't count anymore. I started noticing strange things. Packages would arrive under my name, but I hadn't ordered anything. Amber would say they were subscription boxes she signed me up for. They're good for you, she said, pushing them toward me. Vitamins, herbal teas, brain supplements. Once I found an unopened envelope on the kitchen counter. It had my name and the bank's logo. Amber took it from my hands quickly. Oh, that's just a routine notice. Nothing important. But it's addressed to me, I said. I know. I just didn't want you to get confused. You know how they word these things. Confused. I'd worked in bookkeeping for 27 years. There was nothing confusing about that letter except why I wasn't allowed to read it. She started labeling drawers in my guest house. Pantry items, medications, important papers. At first it seemed helpful, even sweet, until I realized she'd removed several of my belongings and replaced them with simpler alternatives. I couldn't find my sewing kit. My spice rack was missing half the jars. My photo albums were relocated to a storage bin for safekeeping. I didn't remember agreeing to any of it. But when I asked her, she just smiled and said I thought it would be easier for you this way. Easier for me, or easier for her to erase me. I tried to talk to Daniel. Is everything okay? I asked one evening as he picked up Lily from piano class. Amber seems distant. She's just busy, he said. The podcast, the brand, deals, the pressure. She's under a lot. I feel like I'm in the way, I said gently. He laughed awkwardly. You're not in the way, Mom. Just give her space. She's trying to do everything right. And sometimes that means setting boundaries. Boundaries. That word had started showing up a lot. But the only boundary that seemed to matter was the one between Amber's comfort and my existence. The invitations stopped coming. Lily's school recitals, her birthday party, the family beach trip that I only learned about after seeing the photos on Facebook. When I asked Amber about it, she blinked innocently. Oh, we thought it'd be too much for you. The sun, the stairs, the walking. We didn't want to overwhelm you. I'm not fragile, I said, but she was already walking away. Then came the incident with the doctor. I went in for a routine physical and was told I was listed as part of a family health plan under Amber and Daniel's insurance. I never signed up for that, I told the receptionist. She looked confused. You're marked as a dependent. Your daughter-in-law listed you as under her care. I felt like the walls were closing in. Was this what it meant to be erased? Still breathing, still thinking, but legally reduced to an extension of someone else. It wasn't just taxes. It was identity. It was autonomy. It was the slow corrosion of self-respect, masked as help, polished with the language of care and concern. I tried confronting Amber. I don't feel like myself anymore, I said one evening. I feel monitored, like I need permission to exist. She looked at me for a long time, then she smiled. Maybe that's just aging, Mom. It happens to everyone. That night I cried in the guest house, not because I felt old, but because I realized that for the first time in my life I was being managed, not supported, not loved, managed. And that realization haunted me more than loneliness ever had. It began with a locked door, to the main house. For the past 5 years, the guest house key I had carried had also opened the back door to the main house. It had been understood a symbol of trust, of fluid family space. One morning, I walked over with a basket of freshly cut dahlias. Amber had mentioned wanting them for her podcast backdrop. I turned the key. It didn't work. I tried again. Nothing. I knocked, waited, knocked again. Amber opened it slowly, wearing her headset, lips pursed in visible irritation. Oh, I forgot to mention. We changed the locks. The podcast equipment's gotten expensive. We need to be more secure. I stood there in silence, my hand still gripping the useless key. No apology, no spare key, no explanation. Just a new barrier. Another wall between me and the home I gave them. Weeks passed, and I noticed my gardening tools were missing. The set I had used for years, the ones with my late husband's initials engraved into the handles. I found them later in Lily's school fundraiser auction. Amber had donated them. These old tools were just rusting in the shed, she explained when I confronted her. They belong to Robert, I said, voice trembling. They're not just tools. She blinked at me like I was overreacting. I didn't think you'd mind. No one was using them. No one asked me. Again. Then came the family brunch. Or rather, the one I wasn't invited to. I found out through Lily's Instagram story. A long table set up in the backyard, mimosas, glinting in the sunlight, Amber's signature quiche at the center. Everyone was there. Everyone but me. When I asked Daniel later, he looked embarrassed. We figured it might be too noisy for you. I live 15 steps away. I know. But you don't really like loud crowds. That's not true. Well, Amber thought. I raised a hand. I'm tired of Amber thinking on my behalf. He looked away. More and more of my mail started going missing. At first, I assumed it was lost. Then I started seeing envelopes in the trash outside the main house opened, crumpled, clearly tossed without my knowledge. Amber said, "We've been filtering your mail for anything dangerous. You know how scams target the elderly." I stared at her. "That's a federal crime." She laughed. "We're family. Don't be dramatic. Family doesn't open your private documents. Family doesn't laugh when you say the word crime." When tax season returned, Amber came by the guest house with a clipboard. "We're going to file jointly again," she said casually, as though she were updating me on the weather. Again I asked. She nodded. "It saves us a ton. And it's not a big deal. You're already living here rent-free. This just balances things out." I stared at her. "I never agreed to be your dependent. You don't have to. The IRS allows for household care deductions. It's perfectly legal. I never asked for you to care for me." She sighed. "Eleanor, why are you making this so hard? I'm doing everything for you. And all I get is resistance." "No," I said, voice sharp now. "You're doing everything to me." Then she stopped pretending. I asked for my medical insurance card, back the one she claimed she was safeguarding. She said she couldn't find it. I called the provider. They told me I had been removed as the primary contact. Amber's name was listed as my legal guardian. Guardian. I was livid. I hadn't signed any guardianship papers. I hadn't relinquished anything. I was still mentally sound, physically independent, and completely capable of managing my own affairs. But someone she had submitted documentation suggesting otherwise. I confronted Daniel again. "I don't know what's happening anymore," I said. "But I think Amber's setting something up. I think she's trying to make it look like I'm not competent." He looked confused, but not surprised. "She said she was helping. She showed me a file where she said you agreed to let her manage your finances." "I never signed anything like that." "She said you forgot." "I didn't forget. I never signed anything." He stood still for a long moment. I don't know what to believe." "You should believe your mother." "I want to, but she's my wife." "And I'm your mother." His eyes fell to the floor. My breaking point came the day I walked into my guest house and found a moving box on the floor. Inside were my books, a framed photo of my wedding, and my favorite cardigan. Amber stood in the doorway. "We're renovating the suite," she said, arms crossed. "We thought it might be better for you to transition to assisted living. There's a facility just outside of town. Very clean. Great reviews." I stared at her numb. "Excuse me, it's time. You're not functioning like you used to. We've been researching care options for a while now. Daniel and I, you mean you. I'm trying to protect everyone's peace, including yours. You're evicting me," she smiled calmly. "We're helping you. You'll have a nurse, scheduled meals, safe medication management. You won't have to worry about anything, except my freedom, my identity, my dignity. Everything." I told her I wouldn't go. She said, "You won't have a choice if a doctor signs off on it." That was when I realized she wasn't just trying to control me. She was building a case against me. Financial dependency, medical incompetence, isolation, one step at a time. And no one was stopping her. I sat in the garden that night, hands trembling as I held a cup of tea that had long gone cold. I thought of Robert, of how he used to tell me, "Never let anyone make you feel small in your own home." And I thought, this isn't my home anymore. This is her kingdom. And I'm just a burden she's calculating how to write off legally, financially, emotionally. But what Amber didn't know, I had started documenting everything, every conversation, every missing envelope, every policy change. She thought I was passive. She thought I was easy to erase, but she had no idea who she was trying to erase. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that pretends to be calm. The sky was clear. The breeze was gentle. Birds were singing even. And yet I felt something in my chest, a quiet thunder I couldn't name. I had just returned from the pharmacy, a trip I had insisted on making alone, though Amber had offered to run errands for me again. That was her favorite line lately. Always one step away from managing my entire life. I noticed the door to her home office was slightly ajar. Amber never left it open. I stared at it for a long time, keys still in my hand. Then I stepped inside. The room was as meticulously curated as she was. Shelves lined with self-help books, perfectly arranged podcast microphones, artificial plants for aesthetic harmony. I knew I didn't have long. If Amber returned, I would never hear the end of it. But my fingers moved faster than my conscience. I opened her bottom filing cabinet. Inside were folders color-coded and labeled Finances Medical Eleanor. Yes, an entire folder. With my name. I opened it. Inside were printouts, documents, and copies of legal forms I had never seen. A Medicare form marked with a forged signature. A change of contact authorization with Amber listed as my primary agent. A durable power of attorney document backdated 6 months, with initials that mimicked mine, but weren't. She had forged my signature. I staggered back, my heart racing. There was more. A typed note with a checklist. Tax filed, dependent status claimed, medical contact updated, Eleanor's mail redirected. Forgetfulness journal started. Forgetfulness journal. I flipped to the next page. Amber had been documenting moments or staging them to make it look like I was slipping mentally. One entry read, "Eleanor forgot Lily's teacher's name today. Noted increased confusion." Another said, "Left stove on while boiling water, possible early signs of cognitive decline." I stared at the paper, remembering that exact day. I hadn't left the stove on. The timer had beeped, and I turned it off, but Amber walked in before I could clear the counter. She had twisted the story. To build a narrative, to justify guardianship, to lock me away legally and permanently. I took photos of everything on my phone, every single page. Then I put everything back exactly as I found it. My hands were still shaking when I returned to the guest house. That night I couldn't sleep. Amber was building a false legal reality around me, and Daniel was either willfully blind or silently complicit. I needed someone on my side, and I knew exactly where to start. Her name was Rosa. She used to be our housekeeper before Amber took over and insisted we switch to a cleaning app. Rosa had worked for our family for years. She'd watched Lily grow up, celebrated my birthday with handmade tamales, and once helped me install a new ceiling fan when no one else could be bothered. I called her. When she picked up, I didn't even say hello. I simply asked, "Did you see anything strange while you were still cleaning the main house?" She was quiet. Then she said, "You mean like the locked drawer in Amber's office? The one she didn't let me near?" My stomach twisted. "Yes. I also saw her on your laptop once, Mrs. Simmons. I thought it was odd because you never asked for help." "I never gave her access," I whispered. "I know," Rosa said. "That's why I took a photo." She sent it to me within minutes, a blurry image of Amber in the guest house hunched over my desk, with the screen lit up. My email account was open. The next day, I checked my inbox history. Several emails had been opened. One was a notification from the IRS. Another was from my Medicare portal. Passwords had been changed shortly after. That's when I remembered Amber had helped me reset my email when I got locked out. She had set up forwarding rules. All my account notices were being rerouted to her. Amber had been digitally shadowing me for months, maybe years. She knew exactly what I was doing, and what I wasn't. That evening, I went into the garden, not to water the plants, but to plant a voice recorder, the one my neighbor gave me years ago when she was clearing out her garage. I'd kept it in the back of my drawer, thinking I'd never use it. I hid it behind the potted jasmine by the back patio, the place Amber and Daniel always went to argue in private when they thought I couldn't hear. For 2 days I waited. Then on the third morning I retrieved it, and there it was, Amber's voice low and sharp. "Once she's officially under our guardianship, we can use the house as equity. Assisted living isn't cheap, Daniel. And we've already poured so much into her, it's only fair." And Daniel not disagreeing. "What if she resists? What if she fights it?" Amber replied. "Then we'll do what we always do. Remind her she's forgetful. Show the journal. She's not exactly a reliable narrator anymore." I sat down on the edge of the porch, the recorder heavy in my palm. They were gaslighting me. Strategically. Legally. Deliberately. The truth wasn't just cruel, it was coldly calculated. Amber had constructed an entire narrative that I was losing it, that I needed to be controlled, that I was a financial burden that could be monetized. And Daniel, my own son, was letting it happen. They weren't a family anymore. They were a team, and I was the opponent. But they underestimated one thing. I wasn't powerless. I was prepared. And now I had proof. Amber. I never wanted a mother-in-law. Not like this. Not one who smiled in public and whispered judgments in private. Not one who pretended to help but never truly let go. Not one who thought giving us the house meant she still had the right to live in every inch of it. But mostly I didn't want to owe anyone anything. And with Eleanor, I always owed. From day one. When Daniel brought me home, I knew I wasn't what she imagined for her son. I didn't grow up with linen napkins and college-bound summers. I grew up navigating silence, foster homes, locking the fridge at night, reading by flashlight. I learned early safety is something you build for yourself. No one gives it to you for free. So when Eleanor welcomed me with that warm voice and overly firm hug, I smiled, but I never let my guard down. Because kindness like that always comes with a cost. And I couldn't afford another debt. She was everywhere in our marriage. At first I appreciated her help. The wedding funds, the advice, the gardening tips. But after the honeymoon she was still there, and not just in spirit. In our hallway, in our guest room, in our calendar. I wanted to build a home. But I was living in hers. Every corner whispered her past. Every drawer still smelled like her perfume. Every meal came with a story I wasn't part of. I felt like a tenant in my own life. When she moved to the guest house, I thought things would finally feel balanced. But she didn't leave. She hovered. She popped in with leftovers. She offered parenting tips I didn't ask for. She corrected me in front of Lily. She rearranged our pantry without telling me. And when I asked gently for space, she looked hurt, like I'd slapped her, as if asking for boundaries made me the villain. I started reading articles about toxic in-laws, about generational guilt, about what it meant to reclaim space without being labeled ungrateful. And I realized I wasn't being cruel. I was surviving. When I offered to help with her banking, it wasn't to steal from her. It was because I'd seen her forget her PIN 3 times in 1 week. I saw overdue notices tucked in the trash. I saw her pay the same utility bill twice. She needed help. She just didn't want to admit it. So I offered. And when she said yes, or at least didn't say no, I took it as consent. Because someone had to protect her. Filing taxes. It was Daniel's idea. She lived here. She didn't pay rent. She ate our groceries, used our utilities, wrote our insurance plan. The tax code said she qualified as a dependent. We weren't stealing. We were optimizing. Why should we struggle financially when she benefited from our household? We weren't exploiting her. We were surviving just like I always had. As for the medical power of attorney, that wasn't about power. It was about planning. She once fell in the garden, and it took Lily 20 minutes to find someone. I couldn't be in a situation where no one could speak for her if something serious happened. We tried to talk to her. She brushed it off. So yes, I signed the form. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe. But I wasn't trying to erase her. I was trying to keep our lives from collapsing under her refusal to admit she was getting older. And yes, I documented things. Because no one believed me when I said she was slipping. They saw her elegant cardigans and bright lipstick and thought, how lovely. But they didn't see her search for her purse for 20 minutes when it was hanging on her arm. They didn't hear her ask the same question twice during dinner. They didn't smell the gas when she left the stove on. I wrote it all down because I was scared, and I was tired of being dismissed. Daniel didn't want to hear it. He worshipped her. She raised him, sacrificed for him, became a widow too young and never remarried. She was the myth he measured me against. How could I compete with that? I couldn't. So I stopped trying and started managing the truth. I wasn't trying to destroy her. I was trying to protect myself from being devoured by her legacy, from becoming the background in my own life, from living in the shadow of a woman who would never admit that time moves forward and that sometimes the greatest kindness is to let go. Even if it looks cruel, even if it feels like betrayal. If I could do it again, would I handle it differently? Probably. But would I choose to hand my life back over to her? Never. Because no one ever protected me the way I protected us. And if that makes me the villain in her story, so be it. The day after I listened to that recording, I knew there was no turning back. You can only live in denial for so long. You can only convince yourself it's just a phase, just a misunderstanding, until someone says out loud that you're a financial asset to be liquidated. Amber said that. About me. I was no longer a person in her eyes. I was a line item. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to let her win. Not quietly. Not ever. The first thing I did was call my old friend Martha Klein. She wasn't just a friend. She was a retired paralegal who'd spent 30 years working in elder rights law. We hadn't spoken in months, not since she moved across the state. But when I told her what had happened, she didn't even hesitate. You need to document everything she said, every interaction. Every time she touches your mail, speaks for you, or manages your accounts without consent. Write it down. Print screenshots. Back up your phone. I've already started, I told her. But I don't know if it's enough. You also need a lawyer, a real one, not just someone who does wills, someone who knows financial abuse and elder exploitation statutes. Where do you live again? I told her. She paused. I know someone. 2 days later, I sat in the back booth of a quiet cafe with attorney Naomi Giles, a woman in her 40s, with a calm voice and ice-cold focus. She had already read the summary Martha emailed on my behalf. Her first words to me were, "You're not crazy, and you're not alone." I nearly cried. She continued, "What you're describing is a classic case of covert elder financial manipulation and possibly fraud. You've done the hard part, you kept records. Now we push forward. Push how I asked. They live 20 feet from me." "Good," she said. "That means we can catch them in real time." She handed me a list. "Contact the Social Security Office and request a full activity report. File a Freedom of Information Act FOIA request for any filings submitted in your name. Request a full transcript from the IRS. Freeze your credit. Transfer all medical care permissions to a HIPAA-locked provider. Install a voice-activated recorder near your phone line." I blinked at her. "Isn't that a bit much?" Naomi leaned forward. "Amber is playing chess. You've been playing checkers. If we're going to win this, we need to be 6 steps ahead." That night, I followed every instruction. I changed my bank passwords. I called the IRS and began the process to obtain past returns, including ones I allegedly filed with Amber. I reviewed every insurance statement, every bill, and I contacted the local police department to file a non-emergency report. Just for the record, Officer Morales was the one who came to take my statement. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 30s, but he didn't brush me off. He listened, took notes, asked smart questions, and then he said something that stuck with me. "You'd be surprised how common this is, but most people don't catch it until it's too late." 3 days later, Naomi called me. "I need you to meet someone," she said. "Who?" "A forensic accountant. Her name's Dr. Linda Tran. She reviews transaction histories in elder abuse cases." I met Dr. Tran in a conference room downtown. She had already pulled every transaction from the joint credit card Amber had opened in Daniel's name. Transactions that included groceries, utilities, Amazon orders, and a monthly charge to an elder care support agency I had never heard of. "What's that?" I asked. Dr. Tran tilted her head. "That's a billing front. It routes through a fake consultancy. It's how people funnel tax-exempt expenses into personal accounts." "Are you saying Amber is faking elder care expenses, using me as the justification?" "Yes," she said. "And if you give me 2 weeks, I can trace the refund stream." At this point, I had enough evidence to make anyone nervous. But I wasn't just gathering it for myself. I was preparing for war. Meanwhile, something strange started happening in the house. Amber was nervous. I could see it. She started double-locking her office door. She started checking over her shoulder when she threw away documents. And Daniel. He looked shaken. He barely spoke to me. But once, when I passed him in the driveway, he said quietly, "Why are you doing this?" I looked him square in the eye. "Because I should never have to prove I'm a person." He looked away. Naomi helped me prepare a petition to revoke Amber's access to all medical and financial authorities. She called it a conservatorship reversal counteraction. We filed it with the county court. It would take a few weeks to process, but in the meantime, she advised me to do one more thing. Something bold. Get them to talk. In front of a third party. Better yet, a hidden recording. A mistake in their own words is worth more than 100 documents. So I waited. And then it happened. We were at dinner. Amber had cooked some kind of lemon-roasted chicken she barely touched. Daniel was silent. Lily was upstairs. I brought it up calmly. I spoke to a tax advisor. He said it's illegal to claim someone as a dependent without consent. Amber froze. "Why would you do that?" I continued. "What else have you claimed on my behalf?" Daniel looked up slowly. Amber smiled, but there was tension behind it. Why are you bringing this up now? Because I'm not confused, I'm not forgetful, and I'm not invisible. She leaned back. Fine. If you want to undo everything, go ahead. But don't come crying to us when the IRS decides you owe back taxes. We've been protecting you. Daniel blinked. Protecting. Amber turned to him. She can't live on her own forever, Daniel. Someone had to step up. If that someone was me, I had to make sure it was worth it. Worth it. That was the moment I knew I had enough. Because I'd planted the recorder again. And this time, I had their consent on tape. The invitation came in a gold-trimmed envelope. Lily's 13th birthday. Backyard brunch celebration. No RSVP required. Family and close friends only. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I was included. But I knew it wasn't about me. Amber wanted a show. She wanted to prove everything was normal, to parade her version of the family in front of guests, and to keep up appearances in the exact way she always did. Polished, filtered, and controlled. She didn't know I was bringing a different kind of present. Truth. The morning of the party, I wore my best cardigan, the deep burgundy one Robert always said made me look like royalty. I brushed my hair, put on a light layer of lipstick, packed my purse carefully. Inside, a printed copy of my revoked medical power of attorney, a binder of screenshots and IRS transcripts, and a flash drive with 3 full audio recordings labeled and time-stamped. I also carried something more valuable than evidence. Resolve. The backyard was done up like a Pinterest board, pastel streamers, a balloon arch, a table stacked with cupcakes in glass towers. Everyone smiled too brightly, laughed too loudly. I spotted Amber at the Mimosa bar, greeting guests with hugs and cheek kisses, orchestrating the crowd like she was the mayor of suburban perfection. Daniel hovered near the grill. Lily was posing for selfies with her friends. No one noticed me walk in, until I picked up the mic. It was meant for the birthday toast, the one Amber had planned for herself to deliver naturally. But I stepped up and tapped the mic gently. The feedback caught everyone's attention. Before we begin, I said, smiling tightly, I'd like to say a few words. Amber turned her eyes, narrowing. Daniel took a step toward me. Mom, no, I said. Let me. The guests quieted. Plates paused, glasses lowered. I cleared my throat. My name is Eleanor Simmons. And for those of you who don't know, I've been a part of this family longer than most of you have been alive. I gave my son this home. I helped raise my granddaughter. And until recently, I thought I knew what love looked like. Murmurs began. But love doesn't hide passwords. It doesn't fake signatures. It doesn't call you confused while stealing your rights. Amber's face was pale now. This year, I was claimed as a dependent on tax forms I never saw. My medical authority was taken without consent. And my own son signed papers he didn't understand. Daniel stepped back, eyes wide. I pulled the flash drive from my purse. And thanks to the help of a few wonderful people, some of whom are here today, I have the full record of what's been happening behind my back. Amber's voice broke through the silence. You're humiliating yourself, she hissed, moving toward me. No, I said, locking eyes with her. I'm reclaiming myself. Naomi stepped forward from the edge of the patio. She wasn't just my lawyer. She was my witness. As of this week, Naomi said, addressing the stunned guests, Ms. Simmons has regained full legal and medical autonomy. We've submitted fraud reports to the IRS and Social Security, and formal legal action is being prepared. Gasps rippled across the yard. One of Amber's friends actually dropped her mimosa. Amber turned on Daniel. You let her do this. Daniel's voice was soft, but it carried. I didn't know, but I do now. Lily stood frozen beside her friends. Mom, she whispered, you told me Grandma was sick. Amber tried to recover her voice, trembling with performance. I was trying to protect everyone. She's vulnerable. I didn't want her to end up where I interrupted. In a place you could bill the state for while living off my name. People were filming now, phones raised, eyebrows raised higher. Amber's carefully curated reality was unraveling, and for once, she couldn't spin it. I turned back to Lily. I'm sorry this had to happen here, I said. But sometimes truth is the only gift that matters. Lily nodded, tears in her eyes. Then she did something I didn't expect. She walked toward me and hugged me. Amber stormed into the house. The screen door slammed behind her. Daniel didn't follow. He stood there for a long time, staring at the mic I had laid down. Then quietly he walked over to me. I don't know how to fix this, he said. You don't need to, I replied. You just need to stop pretending it's not broken. The guests dispersed early. Amber never came back outside. And that night, the house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. Not silent from fear, silent from peace. The summons arrived on a Thursday morning. Certified mail, bold black letters, a familiar name typed across the top. State of California, Superior Court, Financial Misrepresentation, Tax Fraud and Abuse of Elder Legal Protections. It was addressed to Amber Morgan, but I already knew it was coming because I had signed every affidavit. Naomi had filed 3 motions, a formal revocation of Amber's medical and financial authority over me, a petition for damages and recovery of misused funds filed under my name, a referral to the IRS and the California Elder Financial Abuse Task Force. And they weren't just accepted. They triggered an investigation. The IRS transcript Naomi pulled had confirmed it all. Amber had filed federal and state returns using my identity. She had claimed caregiver credits worth $4,800 over 2 years. She had falsely listed my social security number as part of her dependent household, and she had received refunds based on these claims. The paper trail was irrefutable, and worse, she had signed multiple e-documents using a forged digital signature traced back to her IP address. Daniel was also served, but as a witness, not a defendant. At first, he resisted cooperation. But when Naomi showed him the recordings and the forged documents, his silence cracked. He provided statements. He admitted to signing papers Amber had filled out, never fully reading them. And he agreed to testify that Amber had discouraged him from involving me in financial decisions because she might forget. In court, Amber arrived in a beige blazer and a neutral expression. She looked smaller without her curated backdrop, less composed, less dominant. Naomi spoke clearly. Ms. Simmons is not senile. She is not confused. She is not financially illiterate. What she is a victim of targeted, sustained deception by someone who pretended to act in her best interest while stealing her legal identity and eroding her autonomy. Amber's lawyer tried to argue that she'd simply made bad assumptions. But then Naomi played the recording. Amber's voice rang through the courtroom. Once she's officially under our guardianship, we can use the house as equity. There was no walking that back. The judge's expression hardened. And when Naomi presented the forged power of attorney with side-by-side handwriting analysis, the case was no longer about confusion. It was about intent. By the end of the hearing, the judgment was clear. Amber was found liable for tax misrepresentation, unauthorized access to private financial accounts, and misuse of elder legal protections. She was ordered to pay $31,000 in restitution to me. She was barred from serving as guardian fiduciary or medical proxy for any adult over 60 in the state of California, and she was placed under formal tax audit for the past 5 years. The court didn't jail her, but they made her pay, in reputation, in funds, and in public record. After the hearing, Amber tried to speak to me. Outside the courthouse, she waited by the curb. I never meant to hurt you, she said, her voice hollow. I stared at her. You didn't hurt me, I said. You hurt your own humanity. She blinked, confused. I walked away. Back home, things were different. Daniel came to the guest house one evening with Lily. They sat on my porch steps. She knows everything now, he said quietly. I told her. Lily reached into her backpack and handed me a drawing, the two of us sitting on the porch holding mugs. Underneath, she'd written, Grandma is not old, she is strong. For the first time in months, I smiled without bitterness. A few weeks later, Naomi and I sat down to finalize a trust. I transferred ownership of the house into a living trust under my name with clear instructions. If anything happened to me, Lily would inherit it, not Daniel, not Amber. I want to protect the only part of this family that hasn't lied to me, I told Naomi. She nodded. You've done more than protect. You've taken back your life. Amber moved out of the main house 2 months after the ruling. She left behind a few boxes which I donated. Daniel filed for legal separation soon after. I didn't push him either way. Some decisions you have to arrive at yourself. Justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like clarity, like an identity returned, like a name restored, like peace. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't the silence of tension. It was peace. No more doors being locked behind me. No more intercepted mail. No more whispers about my mind or decisions made in my name without me. I was home. Truly, entirely, finally home. I had the locks changed. Not out of spite, out of principle. Because for years, I lived inside my own property like a guest on probation. Now, every key on my ring belonged to me, and only me. I wake up early most mornings, make tea, feed the birds, check my own bank accounts, speak with my lawyer when I want to, not when someone else pretends to speak for me. I started taking painting classes at the community center, joined a memoir writing group, even volunteered twice a week at the senior helpline, because no one talks about it. How many women like me have stories like this? Silenced, doubted, manipulated in the shadows of their own families. Now I listen, and I speak, loudly. Daniel visits, often in fact. He's quieter these days, gentler, more aware of the weight of his silence back then. He's apologized more than once, not just with words, but with presence. And presence, I've learned, is more healing than guilt. Lily comes every weekend. She helps in the garden, reads poetry aloud to me under the cherry tree, and calls me Grandma L, her own name for me, full of respect and warmth. Last Sunday, she asked, "Did it ever hurt to forgive?" I looked at her for a long moment and answered honestly, "Yes, but it hurt more not to." Amber hasn't reached out since the court ruling. I sometimes wonder what she tells people, that I turned the family against her, that I made it all up, that I was the villain in her carefully edited life. Let her, because the truth doesn't need to be repeated to exist. It only needs to be lived. And I'm living it freely, fiercely, without apology. There are still moments I replay, when I hesitated, when I gave too much grace, when I confused manipulation for care. But I don't regret loving her. I regret letting her love define my worth. Today my home is filled with light. The same sunlight that once filtered through fear now lands gently on peace. No noise, no pretense, no performance. Just the sound of pages turning in the wind, of teacups placed gently on saucers, of my own breath, steady, grounded mine. To you watching this, maybe you're a mother, maybe a daughter, maybe someone caught in silence. Let this story remind you, you are not a burden. You are not forgettable. You are not voiceless. Your presence matters. Your truth matters. And no matter how long someone tries to manage you into the shadows, you can always choose to step back into the light. You're never too old to begin again. You're just one choice away from reclaiming yourself. If you've made it this far, Comment the city you're watching from, so I know I'm not alone out here. And if this story meant something to you, share it. Let someone else know they aren't alone either.